right, we're going to take a small break from inequalities today, and we will work with equations again, but this time they're going to be absolute value equations. So when we're solving absolute value equations, it's really important for you to think about what absolute value means. Okay, absolute value is the distance a number is away from zero on the number line. So how far a number is away from zero. So you probably practiced, like in 7th grade, what's the absolute value of -3? So what you're trying to tell me is how far is -3 away from zero? And you say, oh, it's 3 spaces. If I ask you what's the absolute value of 3, you would also say, hey, that's 3 spaces away from zero. So this time we're going to get a little bit more complex. And instead of saying like the absolute value of -3, I'm going to say the absolute value of x equals 5. So if I ask you to graph that, what you are trying to say is what is or are all the places on a number line that are 5 spaces away from 0. So if you were being really accurate, you would say 5 is 5 spaces away from 0. -5 is also exactly 5 spaces away from 0. Since those are both true, we're going to give them closed dots. There's no like other regions, so I'm not going to shade anything else, but -5 and 5 are both 5 spaces away from 0. So x could be positive or -5 in this case. Both of those would have an absolute value of 5. Okay. Most of the time we're going to solve equations that are a little bit more complicated like this. Solve the absolute value of a minus 3 equals 5. So that means when you take the absolute value of a, you take away 3 from it, you have to get an answer of 5. Okay, I am going to show you how I would work this one out. Okay, it started out like a normal equation. I would add 3 to both sides, because that's not in the absolute value or anything. And then I'd get the absolute value of a equals 8. And I would think about this, okay, on a number line, what thing or things, what number or numbers are 8 spaces away from 0? And you should be able to notice that both 8 and -8 are 2 spaces away from 0. So a equals plus or minus 8, both numbers. Okay, now don't get fooled and think it's always a pair of opposites that are going to be your answers to these problems, because it's not. Okay, but if I check this back in right here, if I did this, absolute value of 8 minus 3, that's 8 minus 3, that does equal 5. An absolute value of -8, which is 8 minus 3, that does equal 5 too. So I'm good in this case. All right, here's your rule. When solving absolute value equations, you need to first use the symbolic method, like I just did, to get the absolute value term alone. Okay, so if you're trying to get the absolute value term all by itself, once you have the absolute value by itself, you're going to set up 2 equations. If the absolute value equals b and b is positive, you're going to solve a equals b and a equals -b. So both of those would be the same distance away from 0. So let's look at this one. Solve the absolute value of 3c minus 6 equals 9. So in this case, what I'm saying is 3c minus 6, that term is 9 spaces away from 0. So whatever it is, 3c minus 6, that has to either be 9, because that's 9 spaces away from 0, or -9, which is also 9 spaces away from 0. So I'm going to set up 2 equations in this case. I'm going to say 3c minus 6 equals 9, and I'm also going to say 3c minus 6 could equal -9. Okay, because if 3c minus 6 was -9, the absolute value of -9 is 9. Okay, now I'm just going to solve these both by the symbolic method. And I get 3c equals 15, divide both sides by 3, and I get c equals 5. Okay, so you might be thinking c equals -5 too, but let's actually try it and see. Let's add 6 to both sides here. I get 3c equals -3, divide by 3, and I get c equals -1. Okay, so c is 5, or in this case, I think c equals -1. If I try them, I want to see if it works. So 3 times 5 minus 6. That's 15 minus 6 is absolute value of 9. That really does equal 9, so that's good. Here, if I try 3 times -1 minus 6, absolute value of this, 3 times -1 is -3. -3 minus 6 is -9, and the absolute value of -9 is also 9. So I didn't get 5 and -5, I got 5 and -1. Those were both correct answers, and you need to write them both. Okay? All right. this one, if you can, try it on your own, and then I will also show you how to work it out. Okay, but pause, see if you can get it right. All right, so first thing here, I've got something outside of my absolute value, so I need to get rid of that first. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And then I got absolute value of 4x plus 1 equals 9. Notice my absolute value term is alone, so I'm going to make 2 separate equations. I'm going to say, well, either 4x plus 1 might equal 9, or 4x plus 1 might equal negative 9, because both of those would give me an absolute value of 9, would be 9 spaces away from 0. So solving this, subtracting 1 from both sides, I get 4x equals 8. Dividing by 4, I get x equals 2. Okay, if I subtract 1 here, I get 4x equals negative 10. If I divide by 4, I get x equals negative 2.5. Either of these could be right. I'm going to leave that for you to check. I believe they are. And those are my 2 answers. Okay, even more complicated. I would love it if you can try to solve this on your own and give this a shot. Again, I'll show you how to work it out. Well, I'm just going to say one thing. You cannot distribute over absolute value, so please do not try to distribute that 2 to the x and the minus 4. Sometimes you might get lucky and it will work out, but in general, you're not allowed to do it, so don't do it, please. Okay, so we're going to subtract 3 from both sides in this case, and then we get 2 times the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 4. Notice my absolute value term is not alone yet. I have the 2 on the outside. Instead of distributing, because you're not allowed to do that right now, I want you to divide both sides by 2. So I get the absolute value of x minus 4 equals 2. So now my absolute value is alone. I can make 2 true equations. X minus 4 might equal 2, or x minus 4 could equal negative 2. If I add 4 to both sides here, I get x equals 6. And in this other case, if I add 4 to both sides here, I get x equals 2. So x equals 6 or x equals 2, that's going to be my answer for right now. And hopefully if you go back and check it, you'll see that they really work. All right, this one's pretty cool and pretty tricky. Okay, absolute value of x plus 3 equals negative 7. If you are smart, genius, you may already notice something already. If you don't notice anything yet, you may try to do something like this. You may try to say, well, x plus 3 could equal 7, or x plus 3 could equal negative 7. You may try something like that. So you'd be subtracting 3 from both sides and say, hey, x might equal 4, or let's do this one, x might equal negative 10. Let's try them. So here we have this. Absolute value of 4 plus 3 equals negative 7. Well, absolute value of 4 plus 3 is 7, which is 7, not negative 7. This one doesn't work out. If I try negative 10 plus 3, then I'm going to get absolute value of negative 7. Well, that's also 7, not negative 7, so this doesn't work out. Okay, you might have been the one that noticed this right away. But we're saying that this absolute value, the distance that is away from 0, is a negative number. That cannot be true. It just does not happen. So because absolute value of x plus 3 can never be negative 7, this is a problem with no solution. And that's my final answer. It has no solution, which is why neither of the answers checked out when you tried them. Okay, try this one on your own, see what you've got. All right, so first thing here, I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides, and I get the absolute value of 2x minus 8 equals 0. Ooh, so in this case, 2x minus 8 equals 0. And if you try something like 2x minus 8 equals negative 0, I hope that you remember there is not a negative 0, so we don't even need to try this equation. Because there's only one number that's 0 away from 0, this is probably only going to have one solution. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides. I get 2x equals 8. If I divide by 2, I get x equals 4. In this case, it's my only solution. Okay, your job is to come back into class and tell me this. So let's see how many of you remember. I bet it's going to be the 3 girls again. Come on, boys. When does an absolute value equation have two solutions. So what type of equation, of absolute value equation, would result in two solutions? What type would result in no solutions? And what type do you think would result in one solution? And also, if you can tell me, what does absolute value really mean? Tell me those answers and I will love you forever. All right, see you later.